Hello YouTube, good morning again. This is Greg. Thanks for coming to visit my channel. A friend of mine in Europe sent me a note asking me did I have a fire kit and what was in it. And I'm a little hard pressed to imagine that they're not much more experienced YouTube folk and bushcraft folk that he would be able to ask a question to, but nevertheless, I do have a fire kit. My to-go kit that goes in my car stays in one of these little wet boxes, and then most of the nuts and bolts of my fire kit go in my haversack that I carry with me. So let me fish some stuff out and I'll show you what's in it. In another video I think I showed that this tinderbox that goes with me lots of places. 1-inch ferro rod and a scraper. As I shared before, somebody gave me that scraper as a knife sharpener. It's the most terrible, awful thing. You should never use it to sharpen a blade that you care about. There's another tinder box with a, almost said flint and steel. We don't have flint in Florida, we have chert. And it works, I think it works as good as flint. And there's some charred cloth in there. I've never really been a fan of charring material that you can find in your closet. There are much better materials out in the wild. Punkwood, cattail, especially if it's early in the spring. Those cattails that haven't gotten fluffy and dried out are perfect for charring and will hold an ember for a long time. So if you get a fresh cattail and char it, you can put an ember on it and it will stay there and you can carry it around for a couple of hours. If you get a cattail that is a midsummer's cattail, you don't need to char it. It's punky enough where you can put a spark on it with a ferrocerium rod and carry it around for 4 or 5 hours. So if you need to ever be mobile with your fire resources, cattails in Florida do the trick. Here's some fat wood that I harvested from a tree yesterday. Here's some that I've been chewing on for a while with my Sureform file tool. This is not a very bushcrafty tool. However, it does a really good job of processing fat wood into a wonderful, usable form. And in just a second or two, it'll get you enough of this kind of stuff to have a nice fire. Fat wood. This is a match case. Man, these guys are amazing. These are really big. You can strike one of these off, completely submerge it in water, and pull it out and it will still burn. It must have a really high magnesium content, because if you've ever seen magnesium burn, it is so hungry for oxygen, it'll pull it out of salt water. Oh, let's see. Gosh, I gotta get this thing open. What else? Anything else in here of note? Mostly in the haversack, I have just found materials that I collect when I walk through the woods, and I've been so polluted from my scoutmaster and my leadership from 30, 40 years ago that it's impossible to walk through the wood without your head on a swivel looking for stuff. Okay, so in the little to-go thing is an antique magnifying glass that I, let's see, there we go. Found in a little shop in St. Augustine. Don't need to burn a hole in the table. This is, I don't know if I showed it to you in any other videos. This is a Lee & Enfield oiler. And in the cap, it used to have a long-handled brass spoon, and it now doesn't. I've cut it off. But inside, I have stuffed a quantity of soft manila hemp rope. I don't know if this will even show. not. It will burn for 5 or 10 minutes. And so if you need a relatively fireproof match, this will serve you well. And they occasion to still find them in antique stores, and whenever I find one, I'll get one, cut the spoon off, stuff it full of manila rope. The rope just acts as a wick. It doesn't really burn. I fill it up with methyl spirits, typically what is that stuff in the yellow jar from the auto parts store? I think they use it to dehydrate hydraulic lines, heat. And it comes in a red bottle and a yellow bottle. The red one is really smoky and nasty, and the yellow one is just perfect. Always carry a lighter. Despite my 1-inch ferrocerium rod, I always carry an extra one. Carry some fat wood, more fat wood. This is military surplus trioxane. My grandfather and I used this on the Pacific Crest Trail and the Appalachian Trail in 1969 on the AT and 1970 on the PCT. On the PCT, there were places where you just couldn't have a fire. The forest fire hazard was so great because it was so dry. And so one of these tablets and my Boy Scout folding stove that looks like the Esbit stove. One of these in there would be enough to boil enough water for us to dehydrate our evening meal, which was always macaroni and cheese and tuna fish. Here's a wet fire tab. Here's a, again, this thing is very bushcrafty. It's a contractor's pencil sharpener. Right? However, besides my Sureform file, it will render twigs and fat wood into shavings that are the perfect deal for lighting a fire. Cannot say enough. A fat wood stick and one of those will get you going. This is, it's not Vaseline. What is this stuff? Oh, this is cocoa butter. Even smells nice. Inside are also some cotton balls, and you can wish the cotton ball around in the cocoa butter, and it acts just like the Vaseline. This stuff will go off. Another stack of jute twine and fat wood. We're pretty lucky in Florida. Just wandering around on this part of the trail, because so much of this part of Florida is scrub oak, sandhill community with a lot of longleaf, loblolly pine, white pine, and because we have convective weather and fires, there's always some deadfall. Even if the stump is burnt, you can chip off pieces of it, and underneath, gravity will have pulled enough sap down to make some really nice crystalline fat wood. There is so much of it in Florida. One weekend trip like this weekend will give me easily a year's supply, and I use this stuff a lot. Recently, a friend of mine, Stephen Anderson from Northern Ireland, had a video where he was talking about making fire, and just on a whim I went out in the woods and got some Florida birch, some cattails, enough fat wood to last a little while. And you can't walk a quarter of a mile around here without tripping over this stuff, so we are really fortunate down here in Florida to have an incredible abundance of this stuff. A little bit of jute twine will make a nice bird's nest, as they call them. But around here in this part of Florida, there's so much dry grass and stuff, you don't really need it. Always have it in my car kit just as emergency. You don't know where you might drive where they don't have things like we do in Florida. This is an old piece of lamp wick that I had just burnt on either end. And in the absence of having nice charred natural material, I can use my flint and steel or my ferrocerium rod and put a spark on this, light my tinder bundle with it, snuff it out, and stick it back in my emergency kit. Also in one of my fire kits that is not the most natural stuff, this is a Kentucky Fried Chicken chin that apparently is not going to come undone. There we go. And these started out their lives as makeup removing cotton rounds in my wife's cabinet in her part of the bathroom. I melted some beeswax, soaked these things in lighter fluid, dipped them in the beeswax, let them dry, dipped them again in the beeswax, and you can take your knife and just scruff up a little bit of this and put a spark on it, or don't scruff it up at all and put some fatwood shavings on it, and these things will stay lit for about 15 minutes. Not very bushcrafty, admittedly, but when I want to fire, I just want to fire. I want to fire now, and I don't care how unbushcrafty it is. These things work really great, and they fit perfectly in the little plastics that they do to-go stuff with, apparently at Kentucky Fried Chicken. A friend of mine gave me these. Perfect size for cotton rounds. And this is not very bushcrafty at all. I'm going to do something on the table here that I probably shouldn't. This comes from, just get a little piece of it. It's going to go off. This comes from my workshop. It's Never Dull metal polish. And we were doing a 24-hour and 72-hour kit class with Civil Air Patrol search and rescue folk, and showing them how to make primitive fires with hand drills and bow drills. And while I do own those skills, and I use opportunities like these to come out into the woods and practice them, because they are a perishable skill. If you do not practice them, it will be more difficult for you the next time you go out in the woods and want to impress your friends with a hand drill or a bow drill. And I do own those skills. However, my best primitive way of starting a fire is just with a flint and charred natural material. One little whack with a chert or the flint and you have a spark and an ember, without having to go look for found stuff, make the hearthboard, make the spindle. Having said that, here in Florida, though, we have a lot of willow, we have a lot of poplar, and out in a community like this, we have a tremendous amount of yucca and century plants. And as much as I love mullein for spindles, nothing in the world is better than the yucca stalk for a hearthboard and spindle. And in just seconds, you can have an ember with that stuff. Having said that, after taught my guys all the ways that they could have a fire with primitive means, I then just went around in my garage in my workshop and looked for all the things that were under the sink and out in the workshop. And maybe you didn't know they were flammable or explosive, but they included things like contact cement, ram oil, Goo Gone, this wonderful stuff here that's a metal polish. Let's see. Isn't that great? It's awesome. I love this fire steel. It's Mishmetal rods come in a variety of different densities, and this is among the softer. Some people prefer the harder, high-density models, and they shoot a broader shower of small sparks. This one just dumps off, as you saw, globs of molten metal into your tinder bundle, or your Never Dull. And man, I love this thing. And my friend was sharing with me, well, I like the harder ones because they last longer. You know what? I've got one of these things that I've had for 15 years, and I dug such a divot in it using kind of a thumb technique that the end broke off. And I put it on a grinding wheel, lots of sparks that way, and kind of restored it so it was usable again. I used it in the jungle where I was making fires every week. Really, if you have to use a ferrocerium rod for every fire you do, you have really made a mistake somewhere along the line and didn't pay attention to your scoutmaster when they taught you about charred materials. Once you have a tinderbox with charred materials, you really don't need to use a ferrocerium rod but once every couple of weeks. But I don't think in my lifetime, my children's lifetime, their children's lifetime, I'm ever going to use up this one, even though it's a softer density and tends to lose more material every time I scrape it. So let's see, anything else? I think that's all the stuff that's in my basic fire kit. Not a whole lot. The orange wet box goes in my car. Anywhere else that kind of want to have an emergency kit. I'll have a twin brother of it that's in my gear room, and when I go out in the woods, I'll typically just dump it all in a little leather pouch that packs more easily in my backpack than a plastic tub. But I tend to think, I don't know how to say it, I don't know what the right word is. I attempt to have a modular approach to the things I take with me. And even if they don't go in my backpack and those little wet boxes, my water kit with filtration and purification equipment is in one of these little dry boxes. My hygiene and personal stuff lives in one of those dry boxes. And when I go out on the trail or out camping, they'll usually go into one of the little Frost River pouches and waxed canvas, just because they pack better. But I tend to think of the different categories of things that I take out into the woods and have them more modular. And this is the modular collection of fire stuff. So, well, thanks for stopping by. I am so new to this and screw it up so badly, so frequently. But it always encourages me when friends come and visit and say something. So if you drop by, drop a note and say hello and tell me where you're from or something. And have a great day till we see you the next time.